I am Slick Nick, your personal certified Enneagram coach. And yes, I love this book. I'll put a link in it right there. You can check it out. It's very inexpensive, but it really simplifies it, as it says, the Enneagram made easy. Here's what I want to talk about in this video. I had mentioned while wearing the same shirt, so I shot this video like 15 minutes ago, I talked about how easy it is to misdiagnose yourself or others without really going in depth and understanding, hey, you've got your actual Enneagram, and then you've got your wing, and then you've got your stress, and then you've got your growth. So you have to understand, like, to ask the right questions to figure out who a person actually is, not necessarily how they appear to be. With that being said, I think it's really interesting because I misdiagnosed my sister as a 6. I made two videos about a 6 specifically, and I talked about my sister, and that's not who she is. She's a 5. She has a 6 wing, and now I understand that. And that's very fascinating to me because 5s are supposed to be the introverts, and 7s are supposed to be the extroverts. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's quite a paradox and quite fascinating. So check this out. 5s are the true introverts out of all 9, okay? However, there's an introverted and an extroverted side of every Enneagram. There's a version. So my sister happens to be the extroverted version of a 5, which is the true introvert. So that's almost confusing itself, isn't it? Now, it's also interesting that for a 5, their stress number is a 7. So at their worst, a 5 becomes the worst parts of a 7. So imagine my sister, I guess at her worst, becomes the worst parts of me. But interestingly enough, 7s are the true extrovert out of all 9. We're the true extrovert. We're the people who love talking to strangers. And what's interesting is our growth is the number 5. So for me, at my best, I become my sister, and at her worst, she becomes me. But we have quite an overlap there. And so imagine this, fathom this, a true 7, a true extrovert, at their best, ultimately becomes an introvert. And that's why for the past couple of years, I've identified as an introvert. I'm like, I totally am an introvert. And everybody that knows me is like, no, you're not. You'll talk to anybody, and you do talk to anybody. You're totally an extrovert. But I'm thinking, but I feel like an introvert. Well, now I understand why. Because that's a sign I'm at a pretty good place in life. I'm healthy and I'm balanced mentally to the degree that I would see myself as actually an introvert, someone who is balanced, which is ultimately what we're looking at 5s, that they're very balanced. So I think that's very interesting that you can have a 5 who's the true introvert, but you can have an extroverted version of that, which is my sister. And then you can have an extrovert, but still we grow to become introverts. So a 5 introvert and then a 7 extrovert, but they basically kind of overlap and swap there. Isn't that interesting that the most stereotypical extrovert of the group at their best is an introvert? And here's what it makes me think of is this. You know, people will wonder, well, with Enneagram, can you change, can you grow to the point that you become another Enneagram? The answer is absolutely you cannot. Once you become your Enneagram sometime in your childhood as a coping mechanism, then that's always what you're going to be. Even if your wing might change throughout time, like probably I used to be a 6 wing and now I'm an 8 wing, but that's never going to change who you actually are. I'll always be a 7, and I've been a 7 since high school apparently. But I can become a better version of myself as a 7, and a better version of myself as a 7 means that I'm ultimately acting like a 5. So imagine this. What's the best 5 that a person can be? Is ultimately a 7 at their best. Does that make sense? The best version of an Enneagram 5 is one who is controlled with the mind of a 7. So who's the best introvert? The best introvert is the one who's ultimately an extrovert, but is healthy and balanced. Isn't that pretty fascinating and interesting? I love with the Enneagram how it's all connected, and how everybody has their own Enneagram, their growth, their stress, and their wing. So it's like all of us are dealing with, at any given time, 4 personalities at once when it really comes down to it. Now, we're all a little bit of each of those, but specifically there are certain ones that we gravitate towards and that ultimately drive us in how we think and act and speak. So let's talk more about this. I think it's fascinating. Your comments belong right here.